The Assistant Minister to the Treasurer, Michael Sukkar, to talk about all the issues in his portfolio and more. Good morning, Michael. I wanted to start by asking you about these reports last week that there are 2,000 homes in Melbourne and Sydney that have up to 6 bedrooms with one person living in them. Is the housing market really broken in Australia when that's still going on?
Well, Sam, I mean, those statistics sound about right, and that was one of the reasons why we, in our housing package in the budget, included a measure to encourage particularly older Australians to downsize. We know there are a lot of older Australians who perhaps are either by themselves or they're a couple and the children have moved out and they're living in these large family homes. And previously there's been some disincentives involved with perhaps selling the family home and moving into something smaller, but one of the measures we've brought down in the budget is a measure that would allow those individuals to put the excess of up to $300,000 of excess between their downsized home and what they purchase into their superannuation account to try and encourage them to do that. So we've recognised, in a sense, that problem, and one of the measures in the budget is specifically targeted at getting at those exact problems.
And of course, there's also been reports, though, that superannuation funds are actually putting their money offshore, up to $1 billion offshore, to invest in affordable housing because, you know, they think the opportunities are not here. Why aren't they here? Why can't we get superannuation funds to invest more in affordable housing and for example, these issues that we've heard talked about of long-term rentals as opposed to just buying? Yeah,
well, Sam, the short answer is Australian superannuation funds are pretty hungry for these types of investments, but we haven't had the regulatory regime here in Australia to do that. That's why, again, in the budget we set up the Housing Finance and Investment Corporation. We're also negotiating some changes to the regulatory regime around affordable housing and community housing providers to basically try and emulate the regulatory regime of places like the United Kingdom, where a lot of Australian money is going into affordable housing projects. So, to be honest, we've tried to emulate or copy that regime, and over the course of the year, and by 1st of July next year, when the Housing Finance and Investment Corporation's up and running, that's exactly what we're going to be trying to copy, and by doing so, we hope we'll be able to attract those Australian dollars to stay onshore in Australian affordable housing projects.
I wanted to ask you about that news poll and what you think the reasons are behind the continuing poor results. Alan Jones said this week on his program that what the government needs is a junkyard dog, someone who's going to get off the leash, and suggested that person is Tony Abbott. Is it too late, do you think, to bring Tony Abbott back into Cabinet or on the front line to prosecute these issues for the government rather than from the outside attacking the government?
Well, junkyard dog is a pretty colourful turn of phrase. I think, to be quite frank, in getting around my electorate, I think Australians probably want less fighting, less sort of mindless opposition that they're getting from Bill Shorten, and they want more constructive governing in the interest of all Australians. So I'm not sure I'd necessarily agree with Alan Jones' prescription. I'd be lying to you, Sam, if I said we you know, don't keep an eye on the polls. Of course we do. You know politicians do, but it's not particularly unusual, particularly mid-term, for governments to perhaps not be flying as high as they would like. Clearly, we've had some significant distractions out of left field with the Section 44 constitutional issues. I don't think anyone out there is necessarily blaming the government for that. These are unforeseen issues that, to be honest, nobody thought or nobody saw coming down the pipeline, and we just have to remain focused on the task at hand. And I know that we will, and I think, Sam, in the lead up to the next election, we will, I think, assume some ascendancy, and I'm positive that we'll win the next election. But we can't take that for granted. We've got to work every day to prove to the Australian people why we deserve that.
Okay, so Malcolm Turnbull to lead the Liberal Party to the next election. You're going to bet your house on it?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay, bet done. Now, we're just going to go live to Donald Trump shortly. He is reportedly going to announce a significant increase to troops in Afghanistan to try and settle the situation. And I know that you have a good familiarity with these issues from your work in a previous role as the chair of the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence Matters. If the United States is going to increase its troop deployment in Afghanistan, are we all the way with LBJ? Should we put some more troops in there as well?
Well, Sam, I'm not going to give a personal opinion on this. This is obviously well outside my ministerial responsibilities. I think without preempting what the US administration is about to announce, I mean, if they indeed announce an increased commitment into Afghanistan, that in some senses that will justify the ongoing commitment that we have given as a government, and to their credit, the former Labor government gave as well. So I think it justifies what we already have there. I don't necessarily think it requires us to do any more. I mean, what we are, in a sense, providing the United States in a whole host of areas is unqualified support, and I think the existing commitment does that. But as far as what, if anything else, the Australian government would do, Sam, you'd need to speak to Marise Payne about that. And the Prime Minister, obviously.
All right, we'd love to talk more to you next time you're on. We'll talk to you about all the issues going with same-sex marriage. But for now, we're going to have to go so we can get to the US President Donald Trump shortly. Thanks a lot for your time in Melbourne today, Michael Sukkar.
Thanks heaps, Sam.